And I just want to say that when you're talking about morality, and you're talking about Sharia law and all these kinds of things, you mentioned something quite interesting. You said, our ordinary requirements for moral philosophy. You mentioned as well, like you've got deontological ethics, you've got consequentialism or teleological ethics, and then you've got virtue ethics.
Yes.
You pick up a book on ethics, like for example John Mackey, you're going to find this kind of classification. This is a Western classification. You mentioned two men, which are Immanuel Kant and John Rawls, both of which, in a sense, represent the white liberal tradition, both white men from the Western Hemisphere. My question is, why should it be that white men dictate to us what morality is? Have we had enough of this in this country, in a sense that, this is now, to be honest with you, in a veiled sense. If you said our requirements for morality as if we've all subscribed to it, we have a completely different understanding and a completely different ontology. Why have you assumed that the white man is right? What proof that you have that is Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, or his hypothetical imperative, or John Rawls' veil of ignorance, what you kept mentioning, any of that stuff is true? And what proof do you have that it's objectively true as an atheist?
Mohammad Hijab, in an array of outlandish lack of common sense and a display of unwarranted virtue signaling, victimhood mentality, and childish argumentation that come across as racist, calls basic moral theory as white man's supremacy. That's been as outrageous in logic as calling cosmology white supremacy just because it doesn't acknowledge or include Native American cosmology. That is Islamist trying to insert dogma into the science classroom. The irony is that this equality over truth and scholarship is a radical leftist mindset. Yet Mohammad Hijab is an ultra-right Islamofascist. In his utopic Islamic state, he will not allow intellectual dissent from his worldview in the slightest. Then he falsely accused moral theory, basic moral theory, that supposedly doesn't include his worldview. Yes, it does. Your worldview is the ontology. Okay? So, yes, it does. In fact, Mohammad Hijab.
So my question is, as an atheist, you have the audacity to say our requirements of moral philosophy, as if the white man's moral philosophy is all of our moral philosophies. No, we have divine command theory, we have Quran, we have Sunnah, we have our own way of deriving morals. What objective proof do you two have that the deontological ethics of Immanuel Kant and or the veil of ignorance of John Rawls, who's a liberal, both of them are liberal in a sense, and or any of the consequentialist ethics of any of the utilitarian thinkers of the modern day is objectively true?
Before I educate you, Mohammad Hijab, how these things work, you are accused somebody who in fact made an argument. He didn't say our morality is true because Immanuel Kant said so. Let's see what he actually said.
Now, the first place to start is to say, well, what would a good moral theory look like? Well, firstly, we should know what it requires of us. In other words, the theory tells us what we ought to do in the world, what's permissible, what's not permissible. It should cohere with our ordinary intuitions. So if it prohibits things that we think are good or neutral, that's a problem for the theory. We also think that it should be universal, that we can take the moral theory and we can apply it across history and across the world, and we can make moral judgments, and it'll tell us that certain things were wrong, even if people at the time believed them to be right. Now, Hamza has in his book a theistic account of what morality requires of us and what a good moral theory is. And the claim is really that God is the foundation of morality. And he takes the divine command theory approach. So we say, whatever God commands...
What's that, you outrageous idiot? He actually addressed the atheist who is a gentleman and speaks totally respectful. He actually never said anything about Kant and all this kind of thing. And he actually addressed his divine theory in his opening statement. And look what Mohammad Hijab says.
As if the white man's moral philosophy is all of our moral philosophies. No, we have divine command theory, we have Quran, we have Sunnah, we have our own way of deriving morals.
Now, Hamza has in his book a theistic account of what morality requires of us and what a good moral theory is. And the claim is really that God is the foundation of morality. And he takes the divine command theory approach. So we say whatever God commands, that is what's right. Now, this is dealt with in what's called Euthyphro's dilemma. There's two horns of the dilemma. The first is it good because God commands it? Or does God command it because it is good? Sorry, there's a terrible beeping sound. If someone could turn that off, I'd really appreciate it. So, the horn of the dilemma is, does God command it because it is good? Or is it good because God commands it? Now, if it's good because God commands it, you run into this arbitrariness problem, which is that God could command anything. God could say, kill the firstborn, and it would be good because God had commanded it. God could say that the right thing to do is wear purple underwear on a Tuesday, something that we think is neutral, and it would be good because God commands it. So there's the arbitrariness problem. If you take the other horn of the dilemma, which is that God knows what is good, and therefore that's why he commands it, then the foundation of morality doesn't stem from God's commands, but it's external to God. Now, in his book, Hamza takes another move to say, well, actually, there's a third option, which is to say that God's nature is good, and that's why whatever stems from God's commands is good. The problem with this approach is that really it just moves the problem one step back. So we can ask, are the things that are in God's nature good because they're in God's nature, or are they good because of an external standard? So God could have a series of character traits. God could be vicious and spiteful and jealous. And we'd say, well, they're in God's nature, therefore they're good. And that would, of course, not cohere with our ordinary sense of what goodness is. Or we could say, God has a series of attributes that match our external standards of goodness. So relocating the problem to God's nature doesn't get you out of this.
Okay, guys, that is the presentation. Look, okay, let's focus all for a moment. That is the presentation, couple of minutes before the outburst of Mohammad Hijab. So, the atheist, totally polite, takes his divine command theory, never said anything about Kant, utilitarianism, consequentialism, nothing. He sorry guys, but I just saw that. So, what the atheist does is takes Hamza Tzortzis' book and makes an argument. And after a couple of minutes, look the outburst of this idiot, Mohammad Hijab. Look his outburst and what he says. What he says.
Represent the white liberal tradition, both white men from the Western Hemisphere. My question is, why should it be that white men dictate to us what morality is? Have we had enough of this in this country? In a sense that, this is now, to be honest with you, in a veiled sense.
Guys, imagine you haven't seen the presentation and you just listen to Mohammad Hijab. Okay, now, let's all see the Nazi Mohammad Hijab got outraged against. Let's see the Nazi. Look what the other guy said. That led Mohammad Hijab to accuse him almost being a Nazi. Look.
So we can ask, are the things that are in God's nature good because they're in God's nature, or are they good because of an external standard? So God could have a series of character traits. God could be vicious and spiteful and jealous. And we'd say, well, they're in God's nature, therefore they're good. And that would, of course, not cohere with our ordinary sense of what goodness is. Or we could say, God has a series of attributes that match our external standards of goodness. So relocating the problem to God's nature doesn't get you out of this. So what does secular ethics have to offer? Well, the atheist has a number of different approaches. They're not necessarily required to believe in one particular ethical system. There's a variety that are available to them. I'm going to give you a couple that I think are very plausible. So the first one is grounded in the idea that we all suffer. That suffering is something that all of us have experienced, that when we...
Guys, and imagine Mohammad Hijab is considered a good debater in the Muslim community. Mohammad Hijab, my friend, if you ever debate me, how many seconds you think you will last? How many seconds? We are not talking about minutes now. If you say the second sentence, if you say just one sentence, you will probably keep your career. In the second sentence, you will say, I will end your career, my friend. The second sentence. One time I tweeted with Daniel Hakikatsu, and he said something. He said, you are stupid, something like that. And he gave me another paragraph. Okay, I did my best, but I was not able to end his career with one message on Twitter. And I told him, I cannot end your career with one message. Please send me. Send me another one. And he didn't. Okay, I did my best. So in one sentence that he sent, I refuted him, but I couldn't end his career with just one tweet. I need two. Okay, that's how smart are these people. Okay, so now let me educate you about how morality works.
What objective proof do you two have that the deontological ethics of Immanuel Kant and or the veil of ignorance of John Rawls, who's a liberal, both of them are liberal in a sense, and or any of the consequentialist ethics of any of the utilitarian thinkers of the modern day is objectively true?
So,
first of all, you imply that we need to conclusively prove things to be reasonable to believe. In other words, you address absolutes and not effective reasoning. Given that the only things that we can know for certain, with certainty, or absolutely, are that we exist and fundamental laws of logic, the epistemic standard you demand is unreasonable and something you also, by definition, cannot provide either. Therefore, hypocritical as well to demand this kind of standard that you cannot provide either. But of course, I'm Socrates' son, so I will give you an answer close to an absolute. I think, maybe, I don't know. Morality, in difference to other fields of episteme, of science, in other words, in the ancient Greek sense, not to confuse it with natural sciences. So episteme are all the fields of humans using systematic reason and evidence to establish truths. So episteme in the ancient Greek sense are all the fields, not just natural sciences that science implies nowadays. So morality as episteme differs from other epistemes in the sense of moral weight. If I make a mathematical mistake, that doesn't contain moral weight unless what? Unless my mathematical error results to, let's say, a plane crash and people dying. But why my mathematical error in this case has moral weight, moral urgency, but if I make in school a mathematical error in an exegesis, doesn't have moral urgency or moral weight. Why? In one case, when people die in a crash, it has weight, my mathematical error. But in another case, when I'm in school and I make an error, doesn't have the same moral urgency. Why? Because God said so. No, because in one case, obviously, people die, people suffer, and that has an effect in human well-being, in well-being. So, morality as episteme, it has certain weight, but from where does this weight come from? Obviously, from suffering and well-being, obviously. I will give you a real example so I can take this point home. In Greece, we had a terrible train accident. And this train accident happened because the officer in the train office was an idiot, and he forgot to turn how you call this? Tweaks. I don't know. You know what I mean. So this guy just made an error of a twist. God damn it. You know what I mean. So, but look now. Can we say that this person is immoral because he was an idiot and he forgot to turn? He did. He okay. So he did and by this act it resulted to 300 young people dying, coming back from summer vacations. Imagine that. Okay. Half of the youth of Greece has a low population problem. So half of the youth of Greece, let's say, died because an idiot forgot to turn a twist. Okay, what I'm trying to say by that. So the moral urgency of this action and the moral weight of this action that shocks people, half of the youth of Greece died. That is what shocks people. They didn't say, God said, don't forget things or don't kill. No. The shock and the moral weight came from the suffering and the harm in the well-being it created. So we have abundant evidence that the moral weight in morality that makes it different from other epistemes is because of the suffering and well-being. So now we establish what is the moral weight in morality that is related obviously with suffering and well-being. Now let's go to the objectivity. What Mohammad Hijab asks. Every moral theory can be objective. Let me give you an example. Okay. Every moral theory can be objective as long as we set. Give me just a second. We set the point of reference. We qualify things. So, what is objectivity? Objectivity is something related to a fixed point of reference. Now, let me prove that. Let me give you a proposition. The devil says murder is good. Is this objective? No, because we all know murder is wrong. It's bad. So the opinion of the devil is not necessarily objective. Now, what if I fix the objective? I fix the perspective and qualify this statement. And I say, according to the devil, murder is good. Now, because I qualified this proposition, that is an objective statement. Now, according to the devil, murder is good is an objective statement. It's true. Okay, it's true. That is true. That statement is true. Although the devil says murder is good, which we all know is wrong, because I qualified this statement, now the statement became true. So, what I'm trying to say is that every moral theory can be objective. So, the point is, what is the true moral theory? So, it's not about objectivity, it's about true definitions. So, Mohammad Hijab, we have two competing definitions of morality. Your deontological morality and morality based on ethics and virtue. We have these competing definitions. How we get to know which definition is not objective, all definitions can be objective. Which one is true? How we know? How we establish what is true? We have one way to establish what is true. First of all, let's give the definition of what is true. Truth is something that is consistent in logic In other words, it doesn't contradict logic in a direct way, but also it needs to represent reality. That is true. We can have internally consistent logic, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily true. For example, I can make a statement like, for example, a cat is larger than a dog. A mouse is larger than a cat. Therefore, the mouse is larger than a dog. What I just said now is logically consistent. What is the problem of what I just said? The premises are wrong. In other words, if we see reality, my premises are not true. But inside the framework of the argument is logically consistent. So what is true? Not only to be logically consistent, it also needs to relate to reality. Reality defines truth. So you have a moral theory, you call it divine command theory. That is kind of the ontological theory. Okay, but okay, it's logically consistent. That doesn't mean it's true, though, Mohammad Hijab. And the only way we have to investigate truth is to compare your theory with reality and see whether that makes sense. We cannot be absolutely certain, but that doesn't matter. The only thing we've got as humans is effective reasoning. It's not we cannot prove anything in an absolute sense except that we exist and fundamental laws of logic. So now what we will do as humans? We say we can't really know anything, therefore everything goes. No, obviously we need some kind of resolution to be able to know stuff in the best of our ability. And this kind of method works and served humanity for centuries. All the technology we have is because of this method. So it's not like an abstract method that is not really true. So we use effective reasoning and we do what the atheist gentleman did. We take examples from reality and we compare them to our theory to establish whether our theory is most probably true. And that we call effective reasoning. Now, what you are doing is hide behind absolutes. Let me give you an example to understand how stupid is what you are doing. We can't really know for certain that the earth is not flat. We can't really know with absolute truth, with absolute way, that the earth is not flat. Therefore, you say that the earth is round and the earth is flat is equally probable. No, that's not true. Okay, so we don't. In other words, what you are doing is the hide behind absolutes fallacy. You demand absolute truth when that is an unreasonable demand. That is not epistemically. That is an unreasonable demand. What you need to do is use effective reasoning. Okay, but in your case, you don't care about truth. You care to protect Islam. So you hide behind absolutes, and you pretend to yourself and to others that Islam is reasonable. Okay, just because we cannot disprove Islam in an absolute sense, that doesn't mean Islam is reasonable to believe. Of course, I can disprove Islam in an absolute sense, but that is for another discussion. Thank you very much.